They laughed at me when I stayed silent. They thought my calm meant surrender, but silence is where storms are born. My name is Maya Carter, and I used to believe that kindness was strength. That patience, loyalty, and hard work would always be rewarded. I was wrong. Because in this world, people mistake compassion for weakness, and when they do, they leave you no choice but to teach them the language of consequence. For 5 years, I worked at Haven Dynamics, a prestigious architectural firm where dreams were drawn in glass and steel. I started as an intern, quiet, reliable, invisible, the one who stayed late to fix others' mistakes. And it was there I met Clara Rhodes, the firm's golden girl. She was brilliant, ambitious, magnetic, and she knew it. Clara took me under her wing, or so I thought. She'd compliment my designs, laugh with me over coffee, and tell everyone, Maya's the real talent here. I trusted her like a friend, almost like an older sister. But there was something behind her smile, something sharp, something watching. The firm's director, Mr. Langford, adored Clara. She could do no wrong in his eyes. Whenever I presented ideas, he'd nod politely, then turn to her for approval. Still, I didn't complain. I kept working, believing my moment would come the way hard work always pays off, right? Then came the project that would change everything, the Orion Tower, a billion-dollar design for a client that could launch an entire career. I poured my soul into it, sleepless nights, endless revisions, sketches scattered like confetti across my apartment floor. When Clara saw it, she smiled, her voice honeyed and hollow. Maya, this is incredible. You've outdone yourself. Don't worry, I'll make sure everyone knows it's your design. The next morning, I watched her walk into the boardroom with my folder under her arm. I waited outside, nerves buzzing. When the doors opened, applause erupted. Mr. Langford shook Clara's hand. Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed her. She had just presented my design. I froze. My chest tightened. Everyone looked at her like she was a genius. And when she passed by me, she whispered so quietly no one else could hear, "Don't look so shocked, Maya. You wanted to stay behind the scenes, right?" That night, I sat alone in the dark office, staring at the blueprints that bore my signature, the one she'd erased. I should have cried. Instead, I smiled. It was the kind of smile that comes when something inside you shifts forever. They took my kindness for weakness. But they forgot, the quiet ones are the ones who learn how to strike last. After the Orion Tower presentation, I tried to convince myself it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Clara just forgot to mention my name. Maybe she was planning to give me credit later. That's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, something was shifting, small, sharp moments that didn't feel right. Clara's tone changed first. She'd stop by my desk, scan my drafts, and say things like, "Careful, Maya. You don't want people to think you're trying too hard." Or worse, she'd compliment me in public, then undermine me behind closed doors. At team meetings, when Mr. Langford asked about new ideas, Clara would glance at me and smile faintly, as if daring me to speak. Every time I did, she'd interrupt, polish my words, and steer the credit toward herself with effortless charm. And everyone believed her. It wasn't just the office politics, it was the subtle isolation. The group lunches I stopped getting invited to. The hushed laughter when I walked into a room. The way my project files suddenly went missing from the server only to reappear with minor tweaks under Clara's name. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't assertive enough. Maybe I'd made it easy for her. But guilt turned to suspicion the day I found an email in the shared drafts folder. It was from Clara to Mr. Langford. "Maya's been a huge help with research and admin work. I'll make sure to oversee her progress personally." Research and admin work. That was how she described 3 years of my designs, concepts, and long nights. When I confronted her, she laughed. "Oh, Maya, don't take things so personally. You're too emotional about this job. People respect calm professionalism." Calm professionalism. Those were the words she used to slice me down while smiling. Still, I stayed silent. I worked harder. But my silence only made her bolder. One evening, I overheard a conversation in the hallway, Clara and Mr. Langford, their voices low. "Mr. Langford, are you sure you can handle the final phase alone?" "Clara, of course. Maya's good for small details, but she's not ready for something this big." That line hit me like a punch. Good for small details. I stood frozen, invisible in the corridor as they walked away laughing. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. My sketches were still on the drafting table, illuminated by the desk lamp, blue lines that once represented hope. Now, they looked like chains. As I packed my bag, I noticed something strange on my monitor, an open email draft that I hadn't written. It was addressed to a major client, attaching files that weren't supposed to leave the firm yet. Files from my drive. And at the bottom, my name was typed in the signature. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Someone wasn't just stealing my work anymore. Someone was setting me up. The email on my screen wasn't just strange, it was a trap. It was addressed to one of Haven Dynamics' biggest clients, attaching confidential drafts for the Orion Tower project, a breach of contract serious enough to end a career. And it was sent from my account. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the message. Attached were documents only Clara and I had access to: blueprints, design pitches, pricing estimates. I hadn't sent them. But someone wanted it to look like I had. And when I saw the timestamp, 8:42 p.m., I felt my blood run cold. That was the exact time I'd stepped out to grab a coffee. My computer had been unlocked. Someone had been in my office. I'd checked the security footage from that night. My name tag gave me limited access, but Julia, the front desk assistant, owed me a favor. She pulled the feed. At 8:42, the camera outside my door caught one figure, Clara. The next morning, everything exploded. Mr. Langford called me into his office, his face grim. The client had received the email and filed a formal complaint. They were threatening to drop the contract, a multi-million-dollar deal. "Do you understand how serious this is, Maya?" he snapped. "You could have cost this company its reputation." "I didn't send that email," I stammered. Someone must have used my computer." Clara stood beside him, eyes wide with pretend concern. "Maya, if this is about credit, you should have come to us. You don't have to sabotage the firm to prove a point." Her tone was sweet, like honey hiding venom. I looked between them, the director I'd worked so hard to impress, and the woman I'd once trusted like family, and realized they had already decided. I was the villain in their story now. By noon, my access badge stopped working. My inbox was locked. My projects reassigned. Security escorted me out in front of the entire office. I remember the way people looked at me, pity from some, judgment from others. But no one dared to speak. Clara stood by the window, arms folded, watching as I carried out a small box of my things. When our eyes met, she smiled, a slow, satisfied curve of her lips that told me everything. She'd won. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by silence and shattered trust. My portfolio was gone, my reputation tainted, my years of loyalty erased by a single lie. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my voice felt buried beneath the weight of humiliation. Then my phone buzzed, an unknown number. A text. "You don't deserve what they did to you. I have proof. Meet me tomorrow. Alone." I stared at the message, my breath caught between fear and fury. The world had turned its back on me. But maybe, just maybe, someone else had been watching. The next morning, I sat in my car outside the small cafe the text had mentioned. The world outside looked normal, people laughing, the smell of roasted coffee drifting through the air, but inside me, something had changed. I wasn't just nervous. I was numb. A man in his late 40s slid into the seat across from me. I recognized him instantly, Evan, one of the IT managers from Haven Dynamics. He looked tense, eyes darting around like a man who knew too much. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured, lowering his voice. "But you don't deserve what's happening." He slid a small flash drive across the table. My fingers brushed against it, cold metal, but it felt like fire. "What's on it?" I asked. "Security logs, email access records, timestamps, proof that Clara used your computer that night." I tried to report it, but Langford shut it down. Said to let it go. That's when I knew he was part of it. My chest tightened. "You're saying," he nodded. "They planned this. Clara wanted your position, and Langford wanted your designs. You were the easiest one to sacrifice." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything that had happened, the kindness I'd shown, the hours I'd worked, the loyalty I'd given, had been twisted into a weapon against me. I left the cafe shaking, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was rage, cold, deliberate, awakening. That night, I opened the files on my laptop. Evan hadn't been lying. The data was all there, IP logs, forged document trails, fake meeting notes. They had framed me completely. And suddenly, the despair that had been drowning me began to burn away. For the first time in weeks, I didn't cry. I planned. I replayed every memory, every insult hidden behind fake smiles, every time Clara had taken credit for my work, every time Langford had told me to be patient while others were promoted above me. Patience had been my curse. Kindness had been my downfall. But not anymore. I stayed up until dawn drafting emails, tracing old contacts, piecing together threads. There was a way to expose them, not through anger, but precision. If they had used my weakness against me, I would use their arrogance against them. When the first light of morning crept through my window, I stood before the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't broken anymore. Her eyes were sharper. Her silence, dangerous. "They wanted a scapegoat," I whispered. "Now they'll get a storm." And as I slipped the flash drive into my bag, a quiet but powerful thought settled in my mind, one that felt almost like a vow. This time, they won't see me coming. You don't explode a lie, you dismantle it, piece by careful piece. Revenge, when done right, looks like patience wearing a suit. Step 1, secure the proof. I duplicated Evan's flash drive across 3 encrypted drives, then uploaded copies to a private cloud under aliases only I controlled. I printed timestamped logs and cross-checked them against the firm's archived backups. Every forged email, every copied draft, every footstep Clara took into my office was mapped and annotated. If they had tried to erase me, I would make their erasure a permanent document. Step 2, assemble the team. Julia was still at the front desk, quiet, observant, fiercely loyal when guilt pricked her conscience. She agreed to monitor internal movements and collect gossip that validated timelines. Evan handled the technical corner, remote access logs, keycard entries, and a small program that proved which account initiated the faked email. I reached out to a former client, Mr. Alvarez, who'd felt uneasy about a sudden price hike on his last invoice. He was furious enough to lend his voice on the record if needed. Finally, a trusted freelance journalist I'd met at a conference agreed to sit on the story until I gave the go-ahead. Step 3, set the traps. You can't force a confession, but you can create pressure. I arranged a subtle leak, an anonymized tip to the firm's legal counsel mentioning irregular access tied to the Orion Tower documents. That would put them on edge and force them to make moves that could be traced. Simultaneously, I planted a false rumor in the office about an upcoming external audit, enough to make Langford check internal logs and potentially overreach. Step 4. Control the channels. There are two ways to kill a company's reputation: the law and the court of public opinion. I prepared both. The journalist held a factual dossier, not accusations, but documents and witnesses ready to corroborate. I lined up testimony from Julia and Mr. Alvarez. Evan prepared a clean packet for a solicitor specializing in corporate fraud. Each path supported the other. Legal pressure would validate the story would make the board act before they could bury evidence. All the while, the predators acted like predators. Clara still smiled at networking events, still shared champagne photos with Langford. They posted triumphs on social media, oblivious or arrogant enough to assume the noise would drown the truth. Their confidence made them careless, and carelessness leaves fingerprints. I spent nights rehearsing every release, timing each piece so their defenses would contradict themselves on record. I scheduled the journalist's exclusive for a weekday morning when investors and clients were most attentive. I booked a consultation with the solicitor for the same hour, so subpoenas could be filed before damage control could be staged. There was one final move: the synchronization. Everything depended on a single signal, a call, a click, a signature that would release the two-pronged assault simultaneously. I thumbed the phone in my pocket, feeling the weight of the moment like a held breath. Across town, they celebrated another small victory, champagne still warm on their lips. I tapped the contact labeled press, hold, and watched the three dots appear as the line connected. The morning the world caught up with them, the city felt smaller, like a stage collapsing beneath already tired actors. It started with a single, clean headline pushed by the journalist, Haven Dynamics, who really built the Orion Tower. The article wasn't spectacle, it was surgical. Embedded were Evan's logs, Julia's timeline, Mr. Alvarez's statement about inflated invoices, and side-by-side comparisons of Clara's final presentations and the original files stamped with my name. The piece read like incontrovertible proof, not rumor. By 9, the firm's inbox filled with the cold logic of consequences. A major investor froze a scheduled wire transfer. The client for Orion demanded an immediate audit. Social media, always hungry, turned the story into a slow-motion unmasking. Screenshots, quotes, and comments piled up like evidence in public view. #WhereIsMaya trended before noon. They tried to spin. Clara walked into a live interview smiling, practiced and poised, but her answers frayed under pressure. When asked about the email that had been sent from my account, she began with rehearsed platitudes and ended with a stutter. The journalist released more, a time-coded clip showing Clara entering my office at 8:40 p.m. and leaving at 8:50, a file visibly protruding from her bag. The clip played on loop across feeds. The applause that once met her name turned to incredulous silence. Legal action moved faster than their PR team. Evan's packet, already in the solicitor's hands, became the basis for subpoenas. Langford's board convened, brow furrowed, as auditors walked the marble corridors. Bankers called with curt, professional voices. Accounts attached to the firm had irregularities flagged. A major account was frozen pending inquiry. Contracts were paused. The firm that traded on reputation found itself trading on crisis. Clients who'd been gently nudged into overpayments now demanded returns. Partners who'd smiled in photos now emailed terse notices of termination. Tomas's ledger, mentioned quietly in the dossier, exposed a web of misallocated funds that pointed to a pattern, not an accident. Regulators stepped in. What had been whispered as internal politics became a full-blown investigation. The most cinematic moment was quiet. the awards wall. One by one, the plaques Clara had basked under were removed by staff who no longer wanted their fingerprints nearby. The office that had once felt like a runway of victory became a corridor of exits. Clara watched it happen, the color draining from her face, mascara running under the harsh fluorescence. Langford, who had lectured me on patience, now stood at a podium as the auditors read findings that implicated his oversight and, in some cases, his complicity. When the board released its statement, it was short and brutal. An internal review had revealed deliberate misrepresentation and breaches of conduct. Clara was suspended pending termination. Langford resigned under pressure. The bank held the accounts. The Orion client paused the contract. Their empire, built on other people's labor, cracked like glass under a heel. I did not gloat. I walked into the lobby the day they cleared my name. The television crews focused on the firm's temporary sign. Faces in the crowd blurred into a tide of relief and curiosity. Julia hugged me like we were survivors on the same shore. Evan gave a small nod, the kind men give when a war is finally over. On the marble steps where they'd once posed for victory photos, Clara and Langford stood hollowed out, shells of their former arrogance. I looked at them once, not with triumph so much as clarity. My voice, when I spoke, was low and steady. They took my kindness for weakness, I said, and the sentence hung heavy in the air. They forgot that kindness learns strategy. They forgot that silence can be a plan. The cameras caught the moment, it played across feeds. In that quiet, the truth landed, their collapse was the sound of justice, precise and inevitable. I turned and walked away, not as the timid intern they'd underestimated, but as the woman who had made her silence speak loudest of all. I was free. I was respected. I stood victorious. Months passed, but the echoes of that storm still whispered through the city's business world. Haven Dynamics, once a symbol of innovation, was now a headline cautionary tale in every corporate ethics seminar. The Orion Tower project was permanently halted, pending criminal investigations. Clara's name, once printed in glossy magazines, now appeared in court filings. Langford had fled the public eye entirely, his resignation labeled voluntary, though everyone knew the truth. But me? I rebuilt. After the dust settled, clients who had once ignored my emails reached out, not with pity, but with respect. Mr. Alvarez offered me a partnership to consult on his new development firm. Evan, finally free from Langford's leash, joined me. Together, we launched Solace Design Group, a company that ran on transparency, not manipulation. And, poetic as it was, half of Haven's former clients migrated to us within 3 months. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reclaiming your narrative. I'd stopped trying to prove my worth to those who thrived on deception. Instead, I built a world where truth didn't need to shout, it simply existed. But fate wasn't done serving poetic justice. A year later, I attended a public architecture summit. As I stepped off the stage after presenting our latest project, a familiar voice called my name. I turned, and there she was. Clara. No camera crew. No power suit. Just a shadow of the woman who once tried to erase me. Her company had gone bankrupt. The lawsuits had drained her accounts. Langford had cut a deal and disappeared overseas. She had no allies left. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between us, a reminder of what we'd been and what she'd destroyed. Maya, she said quietly, her voice trembling, I didn't think it would go this far. I looked at her, truly looked, and saw what arrogance had reduced her to. And strangely, I felt no rage, no pity. Only closure. It didn't, I replied. You did. Then I walked away, steady, unhurried, the sound of my heels echoing against the marble floor like a final verdict. She once believed kindness was weakness. But now she knew, kindness is a weapon sharpened by patience and silence. And mine had spoken loud enough for the world to hear. Poetic justice line, they mistook my calm for surrender, but thunder is always quiet before it strikes. And now, to you, watching this story unfold, have you ever been underestimated? Betrayed because you were kind? Tell me your story in the comments below. Speech balloon. If this tale struck a chord, hit subscribe, because every week, we uncover another story of betrayal, revenge, and poetic justice. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't shouted. It's heard in silence. Collision.